Everyone, and welcome to my turtle painting, a turtle on water. So I'm going to start by using black, red and yellow and just mixing them together to create the very first layer, which will be a very thin base. So I'm mixing it a lot with Liquin paint thinner, and that's to make sure that I get a really nice almost sheer, but there still will be quite a lot of colour involved, very first layer. So it's not too in terms of how much get the colour accurately done, but I just want a very kind of darkish tone, so then when I paint on top of it with the lighter colours, those darker tones can sort of seep through when the light catches the painting. So I'm going to end up doing about 2 or 3 layers on top of this, so it's not going to be too long-winded, not too much drying time, just as much as I can hurry up and do as quickly as possible. So once I've created this sort of outer shape, I'm also using a slightly lighter brown to go in within the little turtle's face and everything, but I can't do any of the additional sort of details on the little shell. I can't do all those details at the beginning. I've got to do that in my second layer. And the brushes that I'm using are, one is a Winsor and Newton brush. It is an acrylic brush. I kind of use it for almost everything. It's a very versatile brush. It's not too thin and not too large, and it's quite stiff. It's not hugely stiff, but it has that strength to it so that it can really pick up the paint. Just remember that oil paints are the thickest paints, some of the thickest paints you can really get. So you want to be able to have a brush that is not too soft and floppy, because otherwise it won't pick up the paint and you'll just be left with this brush like flying around with paint flying around everywhere, and that's not what you want. So then once I've used that for the big areas, then I will use a little tiny brush for going over with the tiny details, and that those brushes are made for both acrylic and oil, so quite good ones. Again, soft, a little bit soft, but the core of them is strong, so that they're not going to flap around and disperse the colour too much, because you want to really get in with the tiniest details, particularly when it comes to painting shells and animals and all that type of thing, because you don't want to you want to get all the little hairs, like for example on fur, if you're painting fur, and on the shell you want to get these really little tiny intricate details. And with the water, it's not too difficult to do for me here, because the water itself is such an incredible vibrant blue that I actually have that colour. Amazingly enough, I normally never have the exact colour that I need, and I'm always mixing for absolutely ages, but this colour I have, and so I'm mixing it purely just with white, and that's not a big mix for me. Normally it's like 3 colours, 4 colours all together to make the right colour that I want. But this is lucky, so I just went over that again, very simple, because there's coral underneath the turtle. Just as simple as I possibly can, as many simple shapes in the first layer, and then I will go over it. And in actual fact, to paint water, it's another one where I do use a little bit more thinner than I would normally on animals and things, or people. So even when I go in on the second layer, I'll be using a lot more Liquin thinner than I normally would, because water has that translucent look, so it's okay to use thinner. But my general rule is, because it's an oil painting, it should really be made up mostly of oil and not mostly of thinner. So if you just remember that at the back of your mind, then you won't end up using too much thinner and making it too liquidy, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. It's just that when it dries, it won't have the vibrancy that the oil paints really do have, and it's kind of the reason that you use oil paints, is for some of the vibrancy. And so obviously if you prefer the impasto look, then you won't even need the thinner. You can just chuck that out and then just slap on the paint and create those really thick, you know, really thick brush strokes. That is common with people who like that type of impasto look, very much of the Impressionist style. So now when the paint was dry, I then went over it with these really little brushes, and that's to create all those really wonderful details that you get on a turtle. Amazing patterns that the turtle shell has, so beautiful and incredible, and obviously you want to create that type of pattern. You don't want to forget it, because otherwise it won't have that really amazing look that tortoise shell does, turtle shell rather. And so lots of different browns, and I've done something that I don't normally do, which is I left the first base colour, the browns that I created, I've actually left them without painting over them. I don't always do that. Normally I would actually paint over the entire thing, because I always see like the first layer almost to be like underpainting, where you just get your outline done and your basic areas done, and then you just go over the entire thing with the details. But in this case, I thought that because it adds another dimension of brown, and when you look at turtle shells, they have so many different colours in them, so many different variances of brown and some red and that sort of yellowy brown, and so you have so many different shades, and it's nice to kind of keep the colours from underneath showing through. So it will be really great when the light hits the painting that you can really see those different colours, and it does give an amazing effect. It's great if you want that sort of realism look as well. And obviously with painting the little face, I've just gone over with the very fine brush to make sure that I get all the little details in of the white. Now, I know it looks difficult because when you look at the turtle you think, well, that would be really hard to paint, because there are so many different shapes and patterns, and on the fins they have these sort of so many intricate little, almost like a spider's web kind of situation going on with the whitey yellow. But once you get used to painting it, this is probably the second or third time I've painted a turtle, it actually becomes easier and easier. You sort of get into the rhythm of working out where exactly those little clumps of squashed up lines are, and then how far apart they are. So it looks intimidating, but obviously don't worry too much if you get a few out of place, because no turtle is the same. And you just want to get the general idea. No one's going to go right close up to your painting and really analyse if you've got them all perfectly done. Just again remember that you really want to make sure you have enough paint on your brush. If you don't have enough paint, your lines won't come out smooth, they'll just come out like separate and sort of fibrous and awful. And you'll get more of the paint underneath showing, and it won't look like a proper line. So make sure you have enough paint and a little bit of thinner on your brush so that you actually get a smooth line, and that will look really good. And make sure again that you keep sort of wiping your brush if you're worried about the colours muddying into each other. If everything gets too difficult to blend because there's so much paint on the canvas, then you can just leave it to dry, come back to it the next day and then keep working on it. It's so frustrating because with oil paints you have to really get used to that element of it not drying fast enough. However, once you do get used to that, you sort of find ways to work around it, and you can actually paint a lot more than you would think in the initial first and second goes than you would imagine. So you actually get used to learning to work with paint that is a lot more wet and a lot more fluid, and you start to realise what the restrictions are. So once you feel like it's looking a bit weird and it's really hard to create any kind of shape or any kind of pattern, and it just all is starting to blend into each other, that's when you either have to sit back and wait for it to dry, which is kind of annoying, but it just has to be done. Or you can completely get rid of the thinner on top of your brush and then go in with completely neat paint and then paint on top of it. And that can work because oil paint is so thick and so opaque, you can actually cancel out some of the stuff underneath. So that is a possible one if you're really in a hurry and you have to get the painting done. It's not totally foolproof because you still might see what's underneath you still might see a little bit of what is underneath if you're painting a big area, but if it's a small little area and you want to just highlight something, you can do that, and it does work. So now I'm going in finally with I also use black on the shell as well. Obviously don't forget that when you use white areas you must go in with the black, because otherwise there won't be enough contrast and it will just look like a whitish type of colour. And it's something that can occur if you're worried too much about the light hitting everything, and then everything is very light and then you don't have any of the darks in, so don't forget that. And now finally doing the water, obviously I've used a lot more thinner with this and creating that really kind of ripply nice effect with the water, the way that the sunlight sometimes shines through the water and you can see translucent areas. And making sure that I've added in a little bit of the coral underneath, but not too much, just trying to make sure that it looks like a really nice tropical water. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making it, and don't forget to leave me any comments or questions that you have in the comment section. Thank you so much again for all your likes and your wonderful comments, and I'll see you all again very soon.